You are listening to LatinxAmerica, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade. Ovi, it's such a pleasure to finally have you on our show, LatinxAmerica, and I am extremely excited to be co-hosting with Richie Nunez this episode. So why don't we start really quickly and learn about your personal journey into technology, and you're a motivator to many. So let's start with how you motivated yourself to join the tech world.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Adriana and Richie, because of people like you that help spread the message is that more of us get inspired. And in an overview, to allow for more questions, I'm a farm boy from the sugarcane fields of Guatemala. And I tell English learners, before I used to say I'm from watermelon, because the accent always sticks with us sometimes. So coming from that background, I came here with simple things like ganas, right? Sueños, and pretty much knowing that there is an opportunity. And just keeping those three things in mind, I saw that I could get some education to be able to learn to speak English. Once I graduated high school, doors weren't really opening because I was still undocumented at the time. This is in 2011. So as the time passed by, I was able to get my DACA, which was my documents. And I joined a program in San Francisco to be able to equip myself with skills, right? I had a great attitude, but I needed a great aptitude. And just with my previous experiences working, as I was mentioning to you earlier in our conversation, I work as a temp employee for Apple, entering as assembly person, and then networking my way into a computer technician. So then when I got my documents through DACA, I went to work for Tesla as a robot technician. And after graduating from this program in San Francisco, I joined Salesforce and moving on to self-driving technology at Uber, then at Cruise Automation, which was bought by General Motors also for self-driving technology. That was pretty much the overview of how I joined the tech world.
That sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, can you just tell us a little bit more about the origins of your story? Like, I know you had mentioned you're undocumented. What was it like growing up for you?
Awesome. So, growing up, really being undocumented didn't mean anything because my growing up was done in Guatemala, which is, you're just there.
How old were you when you came?
15 years old. I was 15. And as a young adult, though, here, as a teenager, should I say, my mom didn't let me go to school right away because she brought me here to go and work. Yeah, it's like, mijo, vamos a hacer dinero, so you got to help me make the money. Entonces, I found myself frustrated at times because I couldn't understand the people around me. Sometimes when there were meetings at work, I was working at a warehouse, working, unloading trucks every night, sometimes 12 hours, 14 hours, even 16 hours. And I was under 18, but I was, I was just working it off. And when I got frustrated, I said, Mom, you have to let me go to school. En español, like, Mama, usted me tiene que dejar ir a la escuela. And finally, I persuaded her to let me go to school. So I signed up to Tennyson High School at 17 years old. And that was in 2008. So after 2 years of being in high school, I already spoke English like almost everybody else with an accent. But I could, talk my way in and out of every situation. And, that was kind of the journey, having to work, having to advocate for myself to my own family. Right, which was my mom, because I grew up without a father because someone killed him when I was 6 months old. So had to advocate. And once I got the opportunity that I was advocating for, which was going to school, I took full advantage of it. Full advantage. I went to every class I could. And I didn't even want to graduate. I just wanted to speak English. So that was the journey of my teenage years. But growing up in Guatemala, very poor, harvesting mangoes, harvesting plátanos, working in the sugarcane fields. I have some pictures when I was in the fields there. And, low self-esteem, low self-confidence because I didn't have a dad. And I had broken teeth, so I would smile, people would laugh. And I tell people I felt like La Chupitos, there's this comedian that most Latinos are familiar with. So it wasn't. I wouldn't say I had the same level of confidence or aspirations or the leadership that I feel I have equipped myself with to this point. Yeah.
In the midst of that adversity, how do you find the passion to continue to get to the places where you just listed out at the beginning here? You've worked for some amazing companies. How did you do that?
Yes, in my speeches, I tell students that my grandmother taught me three things, very simple. Like she never said, Ovi, go to Harvard, go to college, because sometimes parents don't think that way. But she did teach me, mijo, sea un buen muchacho, trabaje duro y edúquese, right? Be a good man, work hard, and get educated. And so once I joined high school in 2008, a year passed by. It was then 2009. My grandma got very ill in Guatemala. So my mom, who was here with me at the time, traveled back to Guatemala, and I stayed here by myself. And then my grandmother passed away just a couple of months after. And I wanted to become a high school dropout. I just wanted to quit. Since I was undocumented, the police had taken my car twice because I was driving without a driver license. I was just sick and tired, had the money and no support, right? Because my mom was there and I was here, and she couldn't come back because she was undocumented too. So because my grandmother died, she was going to be the reason why I was going to quit, until that same night that my mom called me and let me know about the bad news. I didn't go to work that night, and I was just sobbing. I was just crying and crying. And then I made up my mind that my grandmother was going to be the reason why I was going to graduate, right? Because she was like, mijo, get educated. So that was pretty much the drive and the big why, right? I tell people you gotta have your why, because if you can find the why for something, you can endure anyhow, they said. And just knowing really that this is a country of opportunity, I can sometimes sense that the people that are born in the U.S. are more negative about the U.S. than those of us who come to it, So just knowing there's opportunity and see that people have it in front of them and they don't take advantage of it. And I'm like, man, if the opportunity is there, yo tengo ganas, right? I want to. I have all the grit that is needed. Give me the chance. And every time I would network with somebody, share my hunger, my thirst. Que quiero algo más, algo mejor. And just somehow people believe in the law of attraction. Things just continue to, some events come to your life, and without effort, though, the results don't show up. So because I always put in the effort, that's how the results have built up, and it gives me the confidence. Say, man, I learned English in 2 years. That means I'm smart. I graduated high school in 3 years rather than 4. That means I'm smart, right? And even coming from a poor background, so now knowing and being aware of my self-confidence and knowing the opportunity is there, and knowing that if I can continue to be hungry, so that's what keeps me moving. Yeah, that's what just keeps me moving, even when the times aren't or don't feel like the right times, politically, personally, or professionally. As long as you keep moving, then you won't drown.
So, Obi, one of the things that, Latinx America tries to do is we try to get people interested in the tech world, right? Or
Yes.
how to join, how to create, how to invest. You have been spending a lot of time as a motivational speaker working with youth and working with parents. And I know that sometimes the mindset of parents like yours is like, oh, las niñas tienen que estudiar cerca de casa. The girls have to, study close to home. No after-school program activities, or sometimes, why are they putting so much work? They're spending too much time doing their homework. So how do you change minds? And also on the student side, how do you kind of motivate them to join STEM professions?
Yes. Huh. Yeah. It's a very interesting thing. When I talk to the parents, I tell them, ¿para qué nos trajeron aquí? Like, why you guys brought us here? Para la oportunidad, right? So, just being very frank. You brought us here for the opportunity. And the biggest opportunity here pretty much is in technology, especially where we are, no? Especially because it's so accessible. All you need is a laptop, internet, and you can pretty much code your way to success. ¿Verdad? So, yo le digo a la gente, I tell them a story, because a lot of people remember the story. And the very story in a short way is this. Guy comes into his house, woman is cooking. He sees the woman cutting the end of the piece of ham, cutting it off. He says, why doesn't she just cook the whole thing? And he asks, why do you cut the end of this ham off? She says, because my mom taught me this way. That's crazy. Let's call your mom. They call up her mom. Mom, he came in, saw me cooking. I'm cutting the end of the ham off. Asked me why I'm doing it. I told him, you taught me to cook this way. And we're wondering, why you teach me to cook this way? Mom said, mija, that's pretty simple. Your grandmother taught me to cook that way. Let's call up grandmother. Call up grandmother. Grandma, he came in, saw me cooking, cutting the end of the ham off, asked why. I told him my mom taught me. We call up our mom. Mom says that you taught her. Grandma, why do you cut the end of this ham off? She said, mija, that's very simple. My pan is too small. So I tell this story to the parents. I said, we really have to figure out, because we are so ingrained in our culture that we want to continue things kind of like how our roots, right? So I said, then they used to do things differently because the resources were different, the opportunities were different, the level of awareness was different, the leadership was different, the resources was different, the technology was different. So now you have to allow the students, you have to allow the young people to flap their wings and fly as high as they can. And say, I tell them, if you don't have money for education, your kids have to apply for scholarships. And to do that, you need to give them internet, una laptop, and a printer. Because with the printer, they need to make copies of papers they are asked for and things like that. So that's what I tell the parents. And they're like, at the end of the workshop, it's a 1-hour workshop that I do for them. They're like, man, thank you so much. I'll do my best and this and that. And for the students, I tell them the fact. I tell them, our parents brought us here, or our parents came here and we were born here, maybe, right? So they brought us at this level. Now it's our responsibility to take it up to the next level. And I tell them that with another story, more personal to mine. And my mom one time called me. She was angry at me, asking me for some money. This was during high school. I couldn't send her the money, so she got pissed at me. She was very upset. And she said to me, everything you are and everything you're doing is because I brought you to the U.S. This is like you owe me. And so I said to her, Mom, this was all in Spanish. I said to her, Mama, do you remember my cousin Toño? She said, yes. You remember that my aunt also brought him here when he was 17? He was 17 when he was brought here. And she said, yes. I said, you remember that he was deported because of all the drugs he did? I said, yes. I said, exactly. Bringing a kid here doesn't mean that my success is because you brought me here. Everything I've done and everything I am is because what I decided to do. So I tell the students, it's your responsibility. You can't blame your parents. You can give them credit for the character they built in you. But I tell them, you can take it farther and to increase the belief. And of course, we're making it short, but to increase the belief in them, throughout the whole hour, I keep emphasizing my story and the steps and the strategies that I took from milking cows. I tell them, you're in the U.S., you take shower with warm water. You here, even if you are very low resources, you still are richer than people in third world countries, like in the village where I come from. There's still no running water where I grew up to this day. So I keep emphasizing that, and that's what I do for the parents, and that's what I do for the students, so they envision themselves.
So how do they land their first tech job?
Yes.
Because you mentioned that you were undocumented and you had some challenges along the way. So, yet you work for some great companies. So
Yes.
how do they land their tech job? How do they prepare for that?
Yes. So I'll tell you in short how I landed, so maybe it'll generate some ideas for the listeners, right? First, I said there are 3 ways to join: being a temp employee, being a direct contractor, or being a full-time employee. The hardest one is being a full-time employee, of course. The way I joined was a temp employee for Apple for the refurbishment department in the buildings that they had in Fremont. I don't know if they still have them. But this agency hired me, and I was undocumented at the time. This agency hired me to go and assemble computers. And I just networked my way into a different department, and that's how I, getting certifications of certified computer technicians. Then I get my documents, and with my documents, I apply as a contractor to Tesla, and I was hired as a technician. But they had me working on the robots that build the batteries, which they call modules. And that's how I joined the other big tech company, right? One, I was not a direct employee. I didn't have all the perks, all the good stuff, the free phone and all that good stuff. I also didn't have it at Tesla. So because depending on your level of skills, if people say I get paid $30 an hour, for example. If I tell them, you don't get paid by the hour. You never get paid by the hour. You get paid by what you do in the hour, but what you produce in the hour. Because if you get paid for the hour, you can stay home and people can send you the check. Still, but depending on what you know and what you do with that in that time, that's how you get paid. So I said I need more skills. So I went to school in San Francisco, a program called Year Up, 1 year long program. You can go and they would pay me on a monthly basis for me to be able to learn project management skills. And I joined Salesforce through that. I was in Salesforce and an internship of 6 months. And this is what began to do, I didn't know at the time, building my personal brand in the professional realm. And once I joined Salesforce, I leveraged all the connections of the organization to be able to get that internship. And from there, once the internship was over, I decided I want to go and speak full-time, be a full-time speaker. But the school systems, the budgets are always cut. I couldn't make it. So I could make a living out of it. So I had to go get a job. And I applied to, actually, Uber called me. So my resume had the brand enough for them to call me rather than, I was not even thinking about Uber. So they called me, hey, are you interested in working on self-driving vehicles? I said, I don't have a background in that. And they said, but it looks like you have background on working on computers and on robots. And what self-driving vehicles are pretty much robots. Would you mind, and do you want to give it a shot? You want to interview? I interviewed and got the full-time job, pay for my cell phone, gym membership, food. I felt like I made it. And that's how I pretty much, went through the 3 stages from a temp employee, contractor to a full-time employee, and just leveraging everything that I had done. And I also, in my job interview at Uber, I clearly remember I leveraged my personal story. Because they asked me this one question, they say, if you were to name our self-driving vehicle, what would you name it? And I told her a story. I said, when I was 10 years old, my mom bought me a cow. And I named my cow Angela. It was a baby cow. And I used to go feed Angela with a big bottle. And because I grew up with a father and my mom was in the US, I would sometimes feel alone by myself. So I would talk to Angela. And whenever I was with Angela, I would feel safe and at peace. This was me telling the story to the interviewer. I said, so if I were to name this car, I would name it Angelo. Because I would like people to feel safe and at peace when they are with the car. And she was like, oh my God, like I never heard such a unique response to this question, Next day, I received the email, employment offer. And that's how pretty much I leveraged my story, my experience. And that's how much I went from undocumented to documented, working from temp, contractor, full-time employee.
Just as we're bringing the conversation to a close, I just wanted to ask you if there was, somebody that's in your exact same situation now, and you talked about the great span of your life, both professionally and personally. They're in that same situation, and there's just not any sort of inspiration, right? Like, what piece of advice would you give them? A single piece of advice would you give them to keep going?
Yes, great question. I would say continue to listen to LatinxAmerica, especially because you guys bring in real life stories that we can actually relate to.
Thank you.
Our culture, our beliefs, where we want to go. We just don't see a way. And because it all really starts in the mind, it can start by listening to other stories. So they can continue to listen to Latinx America. And besides that, once they listen and they get the belief, they need skill set. So get educated as much as you can, as far as you can. And I don't fully sign up to the you must go to college and graduate kind of set belief, because these days there are programs that can get you to become an engineer within a year. Some are free, most are paid, but as long as you get educated and get the skill set. So that's what I would say.
Well, that's a great way to wrap this up. I should mention that you have an upcoming TED Talk that you recently did, so we will promote as well. But thank you so much for being a listener, but also just for being an inspiration. I see you inspiring the next generation of Latinx who will be joining tech. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure. Gracias.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Latinx America and on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.